lovely people, welcome back to another Story Study Saturday. I'm Sammi and I'm a writer who likes to learn about writing through reading and share what I learn with you. This week I am back on another self-published book, but this time I am actually really happy to be here. This week I'm going to be talking about The Stolen Kingdom by YouTube's own Bethany Atazadeh. I'm sorry if I said that name wrong. I tried to find a time when she says it. I couldn't. That was my best bet. So Bethany has a super informative YouTube channel on her processes of self-publishing, her experience with it, all of the basic, like, I'm an author, here's what my life is like, here's the things that I do if you want to do them, and it's super helpful. So having watched a lot of her videos and like really enjoyed her personality, I was like, I definitely want to read at least one of her books, but I'm definitely diving into this whole series at some point for sure. So if you are interested in a quick summary of The Stolen Kingdom, here you go. Princess Ari is of marrying age, and she has recently developed a gift that allows her to read others' thoughts when they think of her. When a king from a nearby country with a gift of his own decides to use that power to convince Ari, her father, and their kingdom that Ari wants to marry him, she has to escape to save herself. She meets an unlikely crew and finds herself in the midst of a hunt for a magical being called Ginny. Can she make it out of this challenge alive? Let's get into my thoughts on this. I really enjoyed this book, and I knew coming into it, based off of her videos talking about this series and her process of writing the series, etc., that the plots of these were loosely based off of fairy tales. I assumed like the classic fairy tales, but it's really loosely based off of the Disney version of fairy tales. There were a few scenes in this that I like subconsciously started singing songs from Aladdin, and I was like, why is this happening? Why is this happening? What's going on? Why am I singing Aladdin? And then I just couldn't get it out of my mind, and naturally when I finished the book and I went to look at the Goodreads page, the end of the summary is that it is a very loose Aladdin retelling. And I get it now, because there were a couple of those scenes that I was like, this reminds me of Aladdin. One jump, head of the bread line, and that's like constantly just playing in my head. How did I get here? And I got there because that was the aligned imagery. Nothing else really matched up with that. It was a very different experience from the book that I talked about last week, Gifted, because Gifted was like, I want to make you feel how Divergent made you feel. And there were a lot of scenes that were like, this is Divergent. This happened in Divergent. And this was just sort of like, it has the seasoning of the Disney movie without taking really anything from it. It has a couple of images that don't relate to how they were in the Disney movie, but you get the same general essence from it, and I really enjoyed that. It was a perfect tie-in to the movie without ever feeling like it was copying something, and I think that that was done really well, and I'm excited to see how that correlates to the other books now knowing what the series is. And I read the summaries of specifically the last sentence where she's like, this is a very loose retelling of this Disney thing, and I'm really looking forward to how those tie into those other movies. The main characters that we follow are really strong. They're very well developed. They've got clear motivation in where they're going with their goals, and it's all very empathizable because it's genuine. It's coming from a genuine place. It's coming from genuine motivation. And when they get to where they're going and you see how all of what they've been working towards leads to how they end up feeling afterwards, to keep it vague, it's really great. It's really well done. I'm trying so hard to keep it vague, but it's so good the way that it happens that it's like, I can't believe they just went through all of that to get here. And now they feel like this, and it feels so genuine and real because they were so thoroughly connected to their goals. The developments of the relationships in this were also really strong. The way that you move from like strangers to knowing each other to trusting each other among all of the characters that Ari interacts with, it's really beautiful to see those developments and the growth and her like learning to stand on her own 2 feet because of those relationships that she's developing. The conflict never stops being engaging. You never stop being interested in the conflict. In Ari's conflicts, even the conflict that the guy is working towards solving is also fully engaging. I forgot his name. I'm sorry. I didn't write it down. And I just checked the summary and the guy's name is not in the summary either. I would have to pull out the whole book. It's a whole thing. But all of these conflicts are always on the peripherals of every moment that we get to witness these characters in. And it's done in a way that you're always fully invested in how that outcome turns out. And then you find out the outcome and then the book's over and you're like, okay, where is the next book? And then you realize that the next book follows a different main character and you're like, okay, great. love that. It keeps you hooked from the moment that it's introduced on both of our main characters' accounts, and you stay in it until they're resolved because you need them to be resolved, however they become resolved. Going off of that a little bit, the next book in the series follows a different protagonist. It's a different story, but we're introduced to the main character of the next story at the end of this one, and I think it was done really, really well because it was just interesting and confusing enough for you to be intrigued by the character. So once they become our main perspective, you get to have that like, oh, well, I know that you're tied into the story that I care about, that I've already spent so many pages with. So now I'm interested in seeing how this comes about for your story. And I won't go into it because that's not fair to you if you have not read it, which I thoroughly recommend that you do go read it. The ending of this book, and that's all I'm gonna say on that. So what do I think could be improved about this book? I had a blast with it. It was like, I think I gave it 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. But there were some things that were just like general experience things that could have just been things that I missed while I was reading because I was like devouring the story. But I wish that there was a bit clearer sense of time going through this, because there were things that felt like, okay, so it's been a day, it's been a couple of days. Okay, maybe it's been a week. Maybe it's been a couple of weeks. Maybe it's been a month. Feels kind of like it's been a month. Has it been a month? And then you get at the end a character actually saying it's been 2 weeks, but it feels like it's been significantly longer than that. And I just wish that that felt more tangible while reading it, how time was passing and how much time was passing, because I didn't feel like 2 weeks. It felt a lot longer than 2 weeks, and it being 2 weeks gives me a different perspective on how I took certain scenes because I thought that there was more time that had passed. So I just wish that the time and pacing of the story was a bit clearer on that account, but not a deal breaker for sure. Could have just been that I missed some things while reading. I also kind of wish that there was more time spent with Ari's powers and more usage of it. I think it was used really, really well. I think that when it was used very effectively because while we know she can hear people's thoughts all the time, or like the hum of the fact that people are thinking near her all the time, I just wish we had more like of that being intrusive. But every time it was used where we got like clear words that were being thought, it was important to the progression of the story, and we got a lot of like, hey, she's thinking about you, about these things, rather than getting like the direct thought process. I don't really know if that would have made it better to have more of those, or if I just wanted more of Ari having a superpower to be a part of the story rather than something that just sort of was there and not something that was a focus of it. But that is entirely personal preference because, again, I think that the way that it was used was really effective. So what can writers learn about this book? You're fully capable of self-publishing a really great book. It's all a correlation between effort, practice, and investment into your story. If you're willing to pay somebody who is a quality editor, pay them quality money to edit your book to make it seem more like a traditionally published book based on whatever standards people look for in that. Have it really fleshed out and detailed and have it combed through so that everything makes sense and there aren't any plot holes and you've got an extra set of eyes on it. That is going to be an investment that is worth it. Taking the time to actually design an effective cover or pay somebody to design an effective cover for your book, taking the time to market your book, and taking the time to practice writing and become a better writer is all going to be worth it to make a self-published book really strong and give you a different world of possibilities than traditionally published books, while still keeping the same par as those people who made it in publishing. Another thing is to take inspiration where it comes from, but make sure you take time and effort to make it your own. This is so aggressively not a Disney story. It's not Aladdin. It's not even close to Aladdin. It has a few like pinpoint markers of things that are like, that kind of reminds me of Aladdin. But it's so drastically its own thing that this is clearly just taking inspiration from something, and it's doing it really, really well. And I'm very happy that it exists because it's just the right kind of development to those stories that I grew up watching and experiencing, and it gives you the same kind of like energy of it, the same like vibes, hence why I started singing some of the songs in my head. But it is very, very much so its own thing. nothing. I would never correlate Princess Ari to Jasmine. It's not the same. And I am very impressed with how obvious this is source material of it without being too obvious, you know? It's like if you took somebody, if you dressed how you wanted to dress and you did all of those things, but you wore somebody else's perfume, that's how the story is. It's wearing the perfume of Aladdin. It's wearing the perfume of its inspiration, but it is its own individual full-fleshed thing. It's all by itself. It's its own story, and it's doing a very good job of that. And the last thing that I want to point out about this story that you can learn from it is that strong characters make you care about them. And I'm not talking about like strongness of like muscle or willpower. I'm talking about like well-developed, fully fleshed out. This is a character who is a person fully. You believe that they have their wants, their needs, their priorities are all genuine to them. That's what these characters are. They're all very strong characters in that way in this book, and it's doing a very good job of making you care about them as you're reading, because I'm so invested in them, and I don't know if we get to interact with them again because the rest of the books in the series are about different protagonists. I'm hoping they show up again. I'm hoping that they're just like sprinkled in because everything's intertwined. Oh man, I'm so invested, but we'll see what happens with the rest of the books. I'm very excited for them. Have you heard of The Stolen Kingdom before right now? Have you thought about reading it? Have you read it? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think about it. I'm super excited to talk about this book, so leave me a comment. This was honestly a great book to read right after a disappointing book, just because it was the exact opposite of what I had expected, and I was thriving off of it the whole time. So very excited to chat about this book in the comments, so let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It'll really help me out and show YouTube that maybe more people would also enjoy this video. If you don't want to miss any of my uploads, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. I'm here every Tuesday for Writing Tip Tuesdays and Saturdays for Story Study Saturdays, so I will be back on Tuesday with another writing tip video for you, and then again on Saturday talking about another book with you. So I will see you guys on Tuesday.